Good morning. It's Jim Csek with Kelowna Now here in the beautiful Okanagan Valley, specifically Kelowna, with the traffic flowing very smoothly down there on Highway 97. On the phone with me, Ian Burns from Ottawa, our managing editor. We got lots to get through this morning. We're going to start off with GDP. Our GDP per capita shrinks for the sixth quarter in a row. Government spending up, ninth quarter in a row. What do you say to that, Mr. Burns?
Well, it's pretty tragic, to be honest, isn't it? You have to look at that just honestly for what it is. It's very, very, very bad data, and it's something that people have been experiencing. In a way, it's like a vindication of the people who are downcast about the state of the economy, because they're being told by some people, among them Chrystia Freeland, the finance minister, that things are actually fantastic. But if you look at this, GDP per capita declining basically means that people are becoming poorer, and that's now, it's now in black and white, and it's I just think it's very
Yeah,
sad.
it's just a vibe, according to our Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland. That it's just a vibe. It's not that it's bad. And then hey, you're gonna get the GST removed from potato chips for 2 months. So that sounds like that's the best Christmas present ever. They've been all out there. All the Liberal MPs have been, including some of the media, been promoting this GST holiday on potato chips. They make it sound like it's a lot more than it is. Again, the typical building up this huge Christmas present that turns out to be a box of nothing.
Yeah,
And the federal government
well,
posts a $13 billion deficit on top of that in the first half of the fiscal year. There you go. So along with no GDP comes a $13 billion deficit, and most of that is government spending on programs that they won't even tell us where the money went, right?
and that's compared to 8.2 billion last year, the same period last year. So that's a pretty significant increase. It's like 50% increase, something like that, isn't it?
And meanwhile, all this is going on. The news cycle is not reporting this. No, don't put that up there yet. The news cycle is reporting the GST break on potato chips and beer and Nintendo games and artificial Christmas trees. Not that the deficit is abysmal, the GDP is abysmal, and that this government has no plan.
Oh, they do have a plan, but or they say they do, but the thing I would say is it does not appear to be working. That's crucial, isn't it? Because if GDP per capita keeps going down and the deficit keeps increasing, those are very, very bleak fundamentals, and it doesn't really matter what the interest rates are. It doesn't matter what debt as a percentage of GDP is, and all these other things that the Liberal government like to brag about. It doesn't really matter if people are getting poorer and there's a huge deficit, because it's eventually all going to come crashing down, isn't it? Those are the important indicators.
Yeah. And then in Canadian fashion, the Canadian news companies are going to sue OpenAI. I, again, they didn't ask us if we wanted to jump in on that, but they're going to sue OpenAI.
It's interesting you say that, because if you use ChatGPT and ask something about Kelowna, it will actually use our
It does. It
platform.
actually
Yeah,
likes
so
Kelowna
we
Now.
should have been asked.
If you ask it what the best news source is in Kelowna, lots of times it'll say Kelowna Now, and it'll give you the ideas. So,
I
but
mean,
we have no desire to sue them. We would just like our Facebook and Instagram back. So we would like to thank all the news organizations that helped get rid of our Facebook and Instagram and not give us any money. Hey, how's that? That's sarcasm, isn't it?
it's the same gang, isn't it? The same
Yeah,
gang that
same
prospers
gang.
under
Yeah.
the current regime.
So maybe they can get ChatGPT banned in Canada, like they got Facebook and Instagram banned. Maybe they can work on that so that Canada can just be this island of no GDP. I think I'm getting too sarcastic here. Of yeah,
No
just
GDP and no GPT as well.
yeah, no GPT, no GDP, no GPT, and just a sea of potato chips that are tax free.
I would say though about this subject, it is pretty difficult, isn't it, if you think about it? Because ChatGPT is kind of making its money um, without attribution, so to speak, isn't it? Without giving credit to the people
Well,
that
they
it's
do
actually
put
using.
source links in. That's not true. They do put source links
No,
into
sorry, I
the.
don't mean attribution. I mean compensation. That's what I mean.
Well, they do put source links in, no different than Google.
Yep. But I suppose it's a bit more complex than that, isn't it? Because they give you actual insight, don't they? So if you ask a question about, I don't know, if you ask a question about the GDP or something, they will take insight from Bloomberg and whatever else, and that they train the model on that, don't they? The LLMs. So I don't know. I mean, I can see why they're upset, but then on the other hand, it's kind of like how how stifling of progress would it be if they had to like give money to every single source of information that they use? I mean, it would
Yeah.
the whole thing would basically be impossible at that point, and then we wouldn't have these AI models, would we? Which have changed things already so much.
And that person that won the banana art for $6.2 million just ate it. Hey,
It's kind of disgusting, really, isn't it? It's almost like something from the pre-French Revolution, where they would like, you know, set fire to I don't whatever it is. I don't know. Just like have a huge buffet or something like that when the people are starving. I just think it's
well,
such a
I think
grotesque
it
thing to do.
demonstrates the amount of money that the crypto gang has made, and they're just showing you like that it doesn't mean a lot to them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also suggests a decline in public morality as well.
So there you go. The British MPs vote to legalize assisted dying. They must have got that from Canada.
Yeah, well, I've been following this a little bit, and they are very interested in Canada. And I must say, most of the time, Canada has been cited by people who are against assisted dying because they think that the Canadian version has gone to extremes and has ended up, there've been a lot of examples of people who just don't have much money and they've been told, oh, you might as well just die by doctors. And that's kind of been, people have discussed that in England, yeah. But it's a huge moment. Not many countries allow this, so it's a very big moment, I think.
And then with tipping culture changing, CBC asks who's getting the money. So they're investigating. CBC did like the money the patrons hand over. Found there's no guarantee the cash will actually go to the person being tipped. So I guess a lot of restaurants do this distribution of the tip kind of thing, and maybe they take a cut. I don't know. Like, but tipping is out of control in general. Like like they're asking you for a tip when you're standing in line or going through drive-throughs and all that. Like especially from a company like Starbucks, who makes billions of dollars in profits, they can afford to pay their employees more. Why are they asking for tips as you're going through a drive-through?
Well, it's quite a good article. CBC, they do like one or two good articles a day, or maybe a week, let's say. But when they do a good one, it tends to be really good, and this is very
Yeah.
good, I think.
I mean, they
And
do.
there's, they wore cameras to when they ask the employees, and some of them even said this money goes to the owner, so
Yeah.
I don't get this tip.
Yeah, so the CBC and CTV, there is some really good journalists out there. I would say Vasi Kapelas from CTV, obviously very good and very good. One of the few holding government to account. There's a really good segment on CBC called About That, but obviously there's some segments on there that seem to be very biased and talk about Russian collusion all the time. They seem to throw out the same garbage all the time whenever there's something that goes against the narrative. But there, like you said, there is some really good reporters out there too.
Yeah, well, I mean, this isn't necessarily the work of excellent reporters, I don't think. This is just they have the resources, they have the time and the money, basically, and the staff, and they've used it as they should. They've done something useful and interesting. The
Yeah.
problem is when they use those resources for bizarre minority concerns that absolutely nobody cares about, not even the tiny group of people that they think that they're
Or as
representing.
we've seen recently, it seems to be there's a lot of promoting of this GST holiday on potato chips and beer and wine and stuff like that. Like it's almost like they were an arm of the government promoting this like they're building it into be more than it is. But CBC did a good article about that and showed that it really is insignificant, and it's what they're offering. It's again a lot of window dressing, a lot of pomp, and very low on delivery.
Yeah.
European nations preparing for war as MI5 warns Russia conducting reckless campaign of sabotage. Like, I don't know, like I think that both sides could probably share the blame in that mess, right?
Well, there was that absolutely astonishing revelation in the New York Times a couple of days ago that someone in the West, like unnamed, obviously anonymous, had said that the only solution now is to give Ukraine nuclear weapons, like right now, give them nukes, and then Russia will be too scared. I mean, that's the kind of rhetoric coming out of the West. That is just like, that blows my mind. That's astonishing. But at the same time, there's pretty credible evidence that the Russians are, setting off bombs at a DHL. What was it, a
You know,
DHL plane or
for
something like
me,
that? I mean,
the 55 plus days can't come fast enough. There's a guy that made a promise to end the war, so let's get it end before somebody sets off a nuke.
well, that's the most terrifying thing, yeah. And this story, or one element of this story, is that the Germans telling people where to go, like where the nearest bunker is, and there's been all sorts of like really crazy stuff coming out of the
Well, I mean,
Scandinavian countries as
if
well.
you look at the rhetoric that came out of the White House, one, you can use long range missiles and fire them into Russia to escalate it. Two, that the American White House said that you need to lower your draft rate in Ukraine to 18 from 25 to send more young men off to die. And then this stuff here coming now, give them nuclear weapons is one of the things. And this is all happening as they lost power. And now they seem to be wanting to ramp up the war machine.
Well, it's interesting you say lost power, because the Russians have also been bombing the electric grid like big
Yeah.
time in Ukraine. I mean, they're committing absolute abject barbarism against the Ukrainian people, and it turns your stomach what they're doing to them.
That proxy war is at the expense of the Ukrainian people, 100%.
And I would say, not very popular to say it, but and the Russian people, I think they're going to come to rue this down the years when they see how much they've lost on this stupid, disgusting war.
More locally, study of 2023 Okanagan wildfires recommends limiting development in high-risk areas. There's hey, Sherlock, you finally came to a thing where we shouldn't be building houses in the deep forest.
Well, there's two options: don't build there or cut all the trees down. But one of the options should not be build a house there and just leave it as it is.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like you drive through the Okanagan Valley sometimes, and you drive through areas, and there's like pine trees with their boughs laying, like dead pine trees with their boughs laying on top of roofs and stuff like that. And it just like people just, I love the shade. Well, that's just a matter of time, right?
Yeah. And you don't have to look very far, do you? You see it everywhere. It's very common sight, which is astonishing as well. And after all these horrible fires, you do still see that quite frequently.
That's a great photo. We captured that way back on the 97 connector fire back in, I think it was, I don't remember the year now, but that was a while ago, that fire on the connector there. But we were up close on that. As that bomber came in and laid down their fire retardant. Danielle Smith in the news again.
It's a very rich red.
Yeah, Danielle Smith in the news again, taking the federal government to court over the law governing resource development. Danielle Smith not going to back down.
Yeah, she is really sticking to her guns, but would the federal government really be surprised? It's like they're threatening the lifeblood of Alberta.
Well, Canada, Canadians.
There.
Alberta.
Yeah, it is.
Alberta sends money to the rest of the country.
Yep. And another thing
lead in transfer payments. They lead. Every Canadian benefits from Alberta.
Yeah. Another thing about that data, we mentioned it with the balance of payments, but the import-export balance is in the negative right now. And the reason that it wasn't even further down is because of Alberta, basically, in a nutshell. And it really is our most important export.
Alberta is the crown jewel of Canada, and it seems like our current government just wants to do everything it can to thump it on the head.
It does seem that way, yeah. No, I would say a lot of British Columbians would argue that BC is the true jewel.
There you go. Daniel Smith says Alberta is still forming a border plan to meet Trump demands. Daniel Smith definitely being proactive in this. Says she's spending the early days figuring out how the province will patrol its border with Montana, but says there are options and pointed to existing specialized sheriffs uses the model. Like Daniel Smith is a come up with solutions kind of politician. You know what I mean? Like she's a let's get stuff done. Um, a breath of fresh air, really.
You would think she, of all the sort of premiers in Canada, you'd think she probably has the best connection with the Trump team because she, you were saying she had that chat with
Tucker
Tucker Carlson,
Carlson,
yeah,
yeah.
not so long ago. I think she's also chatted with at least once, maybe more than once, with Jordan Peterson, who
She
works for
has.
Ben Shapiro, and
Yeah.
that he's pretty in with the Trump administration, I
Well,
think, as
she's got
well.
her
So.
ticket booked to the inauguration. I'm sure she'll get to meet Donald Trump, and I'm sure she'll say her piece, and she'll and then he knows Alberta well. He knows the Keystone Pipeline, and it sounds like they're gonna get that thing back in place. And so he understands what Alberta can do for United States of America and for Canada, for that matter.
Yeah, well, what is it? It's something like 4 billion barrels a day, I think, of which 80 or more percent goes to the US. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, in a way, that's fundamental to the American energy system. So
I,
he would
I
ignore Alberta at his own peril, I think.
I I listened to a financial guy this morning saying that all these people talking about doom, about inflation on the rise, and all these things about Trump's tariffs, and he said inflation is going to go down below 1%. Energy is going to become abundant and cheap, and we're entering a golden age for the United States of America. Businesses already voted that it's a like a very positive. I think that like the media's, I think maybe turning it into a negative because of their dislike for Donald Trump, but it looks like the markets and some economists are looking at it like it's going to be a golden age, and I believe that to be true as well. I believe technology, um, especially if a guy like Elon Musk is sitting at the side of Trump, that like America has some of the best technology in the world. A lot of it to do to Elon Musk with SpaceX and Tesla and the Boring Company and Neuralink and all those things. Like they're world leading companies, and they can give a lot to the United States of America and its dominance in the world in technology.
Yeah. Well, let's just hope that they don't have this golden age at our expense and leave us on the
Right,
sidelines.
exactly. But I do believe Elon Musk does like Canada as well. He actually was, like lived some time in Saskatchewan, so he does understand Canada. Not a fan of our
He,
current leader.
I think he's a
And I
Canadian
do,
citizen, actually, isn't he?
yeah, I do believe that they do understand all the good that comes from Canada. Canada is a great partner and always has been a great partner to the United States. And we have to recognize our role in that and not overplay our hand either. We have to recognize that they are the dog, and we're definitely part of the machine, but we are not bigger than them.
Yeah, it just has to be a good deal. It has to be the right
Right.
deal, I suppose, because they
Yeah.
can't. If they treat Canada significantly worse than they do their own
Yeah.
citizens, I suppose that's when the Canadians are gonna say we're gonna have to look elsewhere.
Well, Jean Chrétien was really good at it, and so was Harper. They did really well in their negotiations with the Americans. And we just need to bring back some common sense deals. We also give the Americans a lot of water. Fresh water a lot of it comes from Canada as well. So
Yeah, and a lot of the you know, a lot of the where the rivers begin is in Canada. I can't remember the word for that.
yeah,
Like the Columbia obviously begins in Canada, doesn't it? And I
correct.
think actually part of the Mississippi or something that drains into the Mississippi
Yeah,
is in Canada as well, isn't it? That
yeah.
contributes
A lot of the Great
to the
Lakes are
Mississippi.
half and half too, right? So
Yeah, and the Great
it
Lakes.
it is a complementary relationship if done right. It shouldn't be an adversarial relationship. It should be a win-win situation. Together we share like a long, really unprotected border, and we need to make sure that we're protecting each other.
Yeah. I mean, it is win-win, and it has been ever since the Americans gave up trying to conquer Canada, really, or when they stopped sending Irish terrorists into Canada. Just that's when it started to be a good relationship, didn't it? But
I think
now it's in question. But let's hope that it's only temporary.
people need to shift their mindset from this hatred of Donald Trump and from what they've learned of it, and look at America as opposed to an individual. America is we rely on the United States of America for protection as well. I mean, we're under the umbrella. I mean, NATO's under the umbrella of the United States. Without the United States, there really is no NATO.
Yeah, no, I think it's a much more complicated question related to Canada because I actually think that's where we in Canada have a much more powerful hand than the Europeans do, for example, because Europe's over there, isn't it? It's thousands of
Yeah,
miles away.
yeah.
Whereas Canada's not up for debate. If Canada turned, let's say Canada became friendly with Russia or China, that would be the greatest emergency pretty much in the history of the United
I don't think
States,
that would be
other than War of
an
1812.
acceptable result from Canada. I don't think the Americans would stand for it.
Yeah, which means that it's a strong hand, I guess, doesn't it? If you think
Yeah.
about it in that way, we're so fundamental to them.
I saw a funny one out there. So there's some politicians, I think a senator out east there, that wants to secede New York, and I can't remember a couple other states there, into Canada and become a province of Canada.
That's interesting.
Hilarious, right?
Yeah, more likely to happen the other way around, I would say, in the long term.
Yeah. Anyway, Black Friday. It's today. Today's the big day, the really big day for sales, right? So everybody's out there trying to get the best deal. Black Friday, one of the biggest sales days in the United States. It's quite popular here in Canada. I think it's even overtaking Boxing Day. Boxing Day used to be the big day here in Canada. But I think Black Friday is really especially with a lot of online shopping, Black Friday is really kind of changing that. I think that we did a story in saying don't overspend, don't regret purchases and impulse buy this Black Friday. Good time to get some free, like cheap TVs, all kind. Even Costco gets into it, so there's lots of Black Friday deals out there. You do any Black Friday shopping or planning on doing anything?
Maybe one or two things, but I mean, it's got to such a ridiculous level at the minute, hasn't it? It's like I went on Amazon today, and it's trying to tell me that like kids vitamins and things are on Black Friday deal. It's like it used to be just for big items, didn't it? But I feel
Yeah.
like the internet as well is kind of part of the fun of Black Friday back in the day was watching incredibly stupid people fight over TVs and stuff
There you
in
go.
stores. But we don't really get to see that as much
Well,
anymore.
maybe in Canada, Black Friday will not be that big of a deal because most people are going to be waiting for December 14th so they can buy all those potato chips, GST free. So, like, you know what? They're going to save 5% on Ripple chips and corn chips, Cheetos. What else? Cookies, candies, games, newspapers. You can buy a newspaper GST free now. Like
Yeah,
I'm
books
sure
as
people
well.
are going to be stocking up on newspapers, right? So you can buy a bunch of them, and I don't know what you're going to do with them, but and how many artificial Christmas trees do you think you can buy? Just think of all the savings. The more you spend, the more you save, and those chips
Yeah.
will come in handy.
Yeah, definitely. If there's some kind of nuclear war and you need to stock up and have supplies for the long run, you can
Well, if you
easily
can't afford a
achieve
bed, you can
those.
just buy lots of chips, and you can sleep on the chips, right? I guess I don't know.
Yeah, or marshmallows. I think they're probably
Oh,
included. That
marshmallows
would be a
too.
good bed.
There you go. You can maybe make s'mores with chips and marshmallows. There you go.
Yeah, then you can be warm and fed.
BC Ferry CEO floats prospect that fares may rise by 30% or more in 2028. Why not, right? Why not?
We can afford it.
Yikes. Housing report says Kelowna needs nearly 45,000 units by 2041. That's not too far away.
No, that's pretty crazy amount, isn't it?
So that would be almost like doubling our population again because you figure out 2 to 3 people in a home, you know.
And there's not any new large patches of land being opened up. So I assume the majority of those units are going to be in the sky somewhere.
Up and away. I was just talking to somebody when we're looking out our window and saying, like, if you look at the downtown, you can see that in that shot here. That'll be all down the lakeshore, right? That'll be just, like up and away. Because there isn't a lot of land other than,
Well, it's protected by the
ALR
ALR.
land or golf courses, but there isn't a lot
Yep.
of single family homeland here available or being made available.
There's some around the airport, isn't there, up the hill a bit there? We talked about that, didn't we? But
Yeah, maybe Rommel goes out there and asks some people to. Um, yeah, so there is some out there further out there, but I think the bus just stopped by here, let off a bunch of people.
people that need houses.
Need something. Here we go. Justin Trudeau. He's got a tweet out there. A selfie. He loves a selfie. I wonder how many selfie he's done in the 9 years. How many do you think? If we had to guess his selfie rate.
It must be per event. Must be at least, I'd say, triple digits.
He must have learned from Kamala Harris. Take a lot of selfies with a beer in a hand, right? So
yeah,
he's saying
he hasn't had much of that, has he? He hasn't had a sip yet.
I said starting December 14th, like don't buy beer or chips or anything like now. Just wait, and then like cheers to that, and then it'll be a big tax holiday. They're celebrating this like it's like like this is really going to fix everything in Canada. And then we got another tweet here from the food professor. What he says, it's ripple effects. It's a logistical nightmare for grocers, and it causes inflation and regional disparities and then just paying the price. Well, we've seen that with our GDP, and we see that with our deficit, right? All, Stephen Harper gave us the TFSA, where Canadians could actually save money, and encourages people to save and build a better future. This government's giving us a GST tax-free holiday for 2 months, so you can get more potato chips and beer, which will obviously increase everybody's health, right?
And there's a Lego there in that picture, so you can have.
Is there Lego there too? Well, there you go.
Be creative.
And then there's another tweet here from somebody: the business investment per capita. Another chart comparing Canada versus the United States since Trudeau took over. So you can see that. I wonder what the potato chip bump will look like when we put that on the chart.
It's a good time for Prince Edward Island and their famous potatoes.
And I follow this young lady on Twitter too, and she just said, Justin, Canada's Q3 GDP weaker than expected. It only grew at 1% versus 1.6, down from 2.2, and the trend is not your friend, and more rates coming. They have no choice but to cut rates, which will weaken the Canadian dollar. We're in this bad bathtub swirl down, and the United States is on the upswing. And until we get a change in government, we're likely going to continue with more of the same, because they think the solution is taking the tax off chips and beer, as opposed to real concrete solution that encourage investments. And why not take the tax? Even you said yesterday that he admitted himself that the carbon tax may not be the best and most impactful way to deal with climate change.
He did say that, yeah. And he said that if they really wanted to do it, if they wanted to go all in on climate change, then they would have introduced the carbon tax. But rather than give that money back, or some of that money back, then they would have instead invested that in technology and the sort of the transition. I feel like if he'd done that, it probably would have a lot more supporters, no, ironically.
Oh. And then you put this in here that, of course, it came from The Guardian. Tesla owners turn against Musk and said they're embarrassed to be driving a Tesla. Well, get rid of it, sell it, right?
I find this really quite interesting. It's like, how long have people cared this much about the CEO of a company? Like, who's the CEO of like Kellogg's? Does anybody know when they eat their cereal? It's like, oh, I'm the anti-Kellogg's. I'm the anti-Kellogg's CEO.
Or Rogers Sugar, that's putting more people in the hospital than anybody. Rogers Sugar, like record profits. Pepsi, Coca-Cola, all those people, right? Selling sugar water to people. But they're good people, where Elon, like who's creating SpaceX, uh, solar energy, EVs, all these things that are good for humanity. But he said, a couple of things that they don't agree with politically. So Elon bad, obviously Elon bad, Tesla bad, and so damn humanity because Elon supports Donald Trump. So that's the end of humanity and the guy that's trying to save it, um, right?
It's just the politicization of absolutely everything, isn't it? And it's to be regretted, I think, because it infects
Yeah.
every facet of society, really, doesn't it? We had sort of like the inverse of this was the Bud Light boycott, if
Yeah.
you remember that. It's a bit sad, isn't it, that we're just so hyper politicized that it would even extend to something as important as the environment and technology.
So the meme of the day is from our Liberal MP, Melanie Joly, one of our ministers, actually. Uh, she says the GST break is on the way. Well, Conservatives tried to block it. The bill passed in the House of Commons last night. Starting December 14th, families will get the support they need to make their lives more comfortable. Can you ask Melanie Joly if she'll come on and talk to us and explain to us how GST-free potato chips and beer and wine and Nintendo games is the help that people need, like the support they need? Are
I
you
don't
waiting
think.
for that? Is your family like sitting on pins and needles waiting for that tax-free
Well,
chip day?
I'll take absolutely anything I can get and anything they offer. So, yeah, I will be pleased to a very small extent to save a couple of $100 or whatever it is. But it's not very significant, is it? And that's the primary complaint, and I think it's a fair one.
Right. So the more chips you buy, the more you save.
Or the more diapers. I was thinking more sensible things like diapers and I guess like it isn't just chips, is it? It's like rotisserie chickens, as Christian Freeland like to say. That obviously helps. But then it's like it's for such a short period of time as well. It's like how many rotisserie chickens can you eat in that period of time?
So yeah, so you're selling your vote out for the $200 and more junk food and a rotisserie chicken for that matter.
Well, let's if you look at the polls, the implication is that not very many
I
people
think this
are
history
willing
will
to
look
exchange
back
their
on
votes
this
for that.
and say this was one of the worst um, attempts by a government to buy a vote that was ever played.
Yeah, well, we won't have to wait too long for the election to find out what
Oh,
people's verdict is.
even the CBC, like the talking heads there, they said this is just ridiculous. Like it's like for them to be playing this card is just ridiculous. It's nonsensical and it shows a government that either thinks the public is really stupid or maybe they are in putting out something like this and thinking this is good for Canadians when Canada is in such dire straits and telling people that there's just a vibe they're feeling, that it's not that they can't afford things.
Yeah, I mean, this has come at a pretty bad time for Chrystia Freeland, the economic data, because that was she's put quite a lot of energy into trying to persuade people that the economy's
Well,
doing well, and
it'll be interesting to see, like if you watch the questions that are being put towards Trudeau and Friedland and that, are they about the GST thing or are they about the GDP and the deficit? Because what really matters,
well,
Ian? What really
I think
matters?
yeah, I think we know because we have a certain level of familiarity with those terms, but I'm not sure how much people like average voters will even think about
I'm
GDP
just
per
talking about the
capita.
reporters. Like, what questions will they
Yeah,
be asking in the next few days?
indeed. But I suppose their job is to appeal to the largest chunk of people in the country, and I guess no GST for 2 months breaks through a bit more easily, doesn't it? Than look at these GDP per capita results kind of thing.
Mm.
But I agree, though. It's incumbent upon them to emphasize the importance of GDP per capita.
I would think so. And moving on to the markets. Gold up again this morning, again chopping. Like we said, it's going to chop around here. Going to fight with 2,700 as we come into the new year. Choppy, chop, chop, right? For gold. Bitcoin looks like it's ready to challenge that 100,000. We talked about this all week long, that it's probably going to take a run at that $100,000, that psychological barrier, that $100,000 mark in US dollars. And it looks like it wants to challenge it. And then the Canadian dollar to the US dollar, like it, those GDP numbers don't help, right?
Definitely
Deficit
not.
numbers don't help. And if they have to cut rates, which I believe they do, I don't think they have a choice. They need to stimulate this economy because they choked it. They choked it off, and then they poured money into it and wasted money on things, and then they instead of putting money that builds production and capacity in that, they put it into nonsense. And now even this GST break is more nonsense. And AI, Anthropic with a new release. So lots of cool stuff coming out of Anthropic. So lots of stuff developing in AI. Like that world is just continues to get more and more relevant to our daily lives. And EV stuff, I didn't put anything in here today, but I did watch a piece out of China. I think 68% of all new vehicles are new energy vehicles. So China's really moving into the new energy vehicles at the expense of the German automakers.
They still haven't cracked it, have they, the Germans?
Yeah, they're real tough times for Volkswagen coming up for sure.
Well, also Nissan in Japan. They're
Nissan's
in.
like could be on its last legs. They're all going to be looking for bailouts here pretty quick. I mean, auto manufacturing in Europe, that's one of their mainstays. That and pharmaceuticals, right? That's their big industries, right? And I would say pharmaceuticals are maybe okay with like Ozempic and different things they bring out, but auto manufacturing in trouble all around the world. Like the legacy automakers are in trouble because they're not making that switch, and their vehicles have gotten more and more expensive. Stellantis, which is the Jeep Dodge brand, lots are full of vehicles in both sides of the border. Vehicles are very expensive vehicles that they can't sell.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a sort of historic misjudgment on the part of a lot of these companies, doesn't it? Like they really didn't put the time and effort into electric cars, but I guess we'll know for sure in the next 5 years, won't we, which ones are going to survive and which ones aren't.
It'll be interesting to see with the Trump administration because they're going to scrap the EV mandate, I'm sure, and then they're going to scrap the EV tax credit to see what that gives. It'll give the American automakers some breathing room to make their shift. I think they're relying on hybrids right now. I think it'll give them some more room, whereas the German automakers and other European automakers don't seem to have that room because I think they're tightening EV regulations over there. You know what I mean? They're getting stricter over there.
Yeah, they're absolutely bananas in England, for example, where they're going to fine automakers who sell beyond a certain number, who sell
Yeah.
ICE cars, like average gas cars. So if you sell, say you've got a limit of like 50,000, for each one that you sell past that, you get
Yeah.
fined quite a large sum of money.
Well, in China too, right now, like you can buy an ICE car, but it's really hard to get it registered. They're making it really difficult. There is definitely a strong push. I mean, China has lots of pollution, air pollution. Like, there's no doubt that gas cars pollute. I mean, that's a fact. Like you want to test that out, sit in your car in the garage and don't open the door and see how long you last. And then,
Yeah.
but don't do that, obviously, because that's a bad idea. Don't do that.
I think the Chinese, it's quite interesting with the Chinese because what's considered to be one of their biggest weaknesses, geopolitical weaknesses, is that they don't have anywhere near enough oil to look after themselves. And obviously, anybody that's read about choke points and so on in the global economy, they are one of the most vulnerable countries in the world when it comes to oil because they get most of it from the Gulf, and obviously it has to come through, Indonesia, Malaysia, all those islands. So they're very vulnerable with their oil supplies. So if they transition to fully electric cars, then they don't really need as much oil.
Yeah, they
They
are
just use
transitioning
the
to solar and
coal
wind
power
and
stations.
small modular reactors, and they even Australia is really worried about them because they're not going to be purchasing as much coal, and Australia is a big coal producer, like one of the world's largest coal producers.
Yeah, and also, but on the other hand, they also produce a lot of the elements and minerals and things that go into creating batteries, don't they?
Yeah,
So
no, they
it's
for sure. Australia is a big mining country, like big, big, big. That's below. They do a lot in there, right? So
yeah, that's like the basis of their prosperity in many ways.
it is so kind of like Canada's too, except for we have somebody else running the place that doesn't want us to utilize any of that. It's almost like another country is paying our country to kind of like put a lid on it so they can make more money off of theirs.
Yeah, plenty of
Okay,
accusations of that kind been thrown around.
there you go. We're coming up on a new year. We're going to talk about this book. We're going to talk about it quite a bit. We've got this day planner, weekly planner, goal setting, and I think one of the things to do if you want a better 2025 is to set some goals um, and keep working towards those goals. And one of those is we're going to kind of start sharing some of the things that you can start saving money in different ways. Like one of the things is to do is make decisions. Like instead of buying that $8 coffee, put that $8 into, like, for instance, a Wealth Simple account and buy $8 worth of a stock, whatever stock it is that you want to buy. You'd be better off at the end of the day. You'll have, whether that, even if that stock goes down half, 50%, you'll still have $4. Whereas if the coffee, you'll have nothing once you've consumed it.
Yeah, except maybe a bit of extra weight and some rotten teeth.
Yeah, I was going to say you get maybe a dental appointment out of it, I guess. But and maybe, just maybe, like if you think you're saving money by buying potato chips, don't buy the potato chips. Not only will you save the 5% GST, you'll save the $7 almost for a large bag of barbecue chips. Think of that savings. You want to really save money.
Yeah,
Stop
but
buying it.
it's also gonna apply to McDonald's, isn't it? Fast food. So that's another potential area you could save. Make
Just
your own
stop.
burgers.
Just stop buying garbage food. Like, don't shop the middle aisles. Shop the perimeter. Like the other day, I was at one of the fancier grocery stores and I looked. There's a little tiny cake about like that big, almost, like, fancy cake though. Fat, and I looked at it like double chocolate cake, and I was just like, oh, I was gonna get that for my granddaughter. And then $55
Wow.
for a cake that would barely serve probably 4 or 5 people. Fancy looking though, beautiful looking cake. $55. Like,
Yeah, the presentation of cakes nowadays is very high, isn't it?
so I
That's one
went
thing
home and
that's
asked
improved
my
in life.
daughter to make me a chocolate cake, which she whipped up like in like 35 minutes. She's a great baker, and it was like a triple layered double chocolate cake with cream cheese chocolate icing, and that cake was so good, and it was under $5.
Wow.
There you go. You want to
That's the
save
answer,
money?
and then you can invest that money instead.
And she makes sourdough bread all the time because you have a starter. There's only two ingredients to the bread. It's flour and water, and very cheap to make. And like, is a sourdough loaf, and she has all the little fancy little things on top. It looks amazing. I must make that under $1, and tastes so good. It's hard to eat the other bread after that.
And a great smell as well that it sends around the house.
Nothing like home baked bread. But I know that a lot of people say there's no time. It's just about balancing your time. Maybe a little less Netflix, which you can cut too, and maybe spend some time on YouTube, which is free, and learn some stuff, like learn how to make chocolate cake or a sourdough loaf of bread.
Or how to invest, how to be a retail investor.
How to invest. And even if you make mistakes, if you're trading that $8 cup of coffee for an investment, you're still ahead even if you make the most abysmal mistakes. Do you know what I mean? Even if you lose 90% of the value of that stock, like if you make the most horrible mistake ever, you're still ahead of the cup of coffee.
Yeah. They're never going to come take money off you.
Your health is better. Your health is better. And you do have like some value in that stock, and you're learning. You're actually, every failure that you make in the investing market is a lesson that you can carry into your next investment. But there is good values out there, and you can learn, and it just makes sense, and just make better traits, and it'll help your the path to financial freedom is putting the money that you save to work, not getting tax breaks on chips that you shouldn't be eating in the first place.
But they're so tasty.
They sure are. There's too many of us that have consumed too many of those, though, and we can see it in there. You can see it. How's that?
You can see it in the health data, can't you? And the kind of health problems that people have on the sort of macro scale.
It's a crisis in the United States, and we're not too far behind. Obesity, and heart disease, diabetes, all those things. High sugar, high sodium.
And Canada, in terms of like consumption per capita, Canada's in like top 2 or top 3 in the Western world for ultra processed foods, which are like all the rage now, aren't they, for being particularly bad for you? So it's obviously the diet, isn't it? The diet is a huge.
Again, like I said, we're going to be promoting this book, so you can have it better anyway, and a custom cover too, based on we're using AI to create these covers. That's your spirit animal. And then it'll talk about your number and your astrology, your zodiac, all that stuff. Make you feel better about yourself, and maybe you'll eat less chips. How's that? Enough for
Sounds
today?
like a plan.
Enough for today? News that you need to know.
I think
news
so.
a different way, right? We're going to rename the show too, right? We're going to call it Jim and Ian with the really big show. Alrighty.
Maybe
you have a good weekend. Don't spend too much money on Black Friday. Save some of that for December 14th so you can, get lined up at Walmart there for your chips. See you later. Thank you for watching Kelowna Now.